What is up, everybody? Bobby here, the Nintendo Guru, and I am back with another Nintendo Guru game review. This time, I brought a good friend of mine, co-host on the Planet Nintendo podcast, Patrick McNamara, Mr. NintenTalk himself. How you doing, Pat?
What's up, Bobby? Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this game. Very interesting game.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. So the game we're going to be discussing today is called My Memory of Us. The game actually launches on January 24th on the Nintendo Switch for $14.99. Pat, let's just jump right into it. The overall synopsis of this review, which you're going to hear, is we're going to discuss things about the graphics, music, fun factor, controls, and then overall, and then we'll break it down and give scores on everything as we go.
So at first glance, the graphics, I don't think are anything, revolutionary or anything like that. The thing that stuck out in my mind is the style of this game more so, and they do that graphically. This entire game is black and white, but there are some points of emphasis that are red. So there's only like 3 colors in this game. And what I like about this game is like kind of like an adventure puzzle type game. So the things of interest are painted red, which sounds easy, but there's just random objects painted red. So it's actually a little bit more easier, and I felt like it was a lot better in that sense because you want to keep playing because you know what objects to use, you just don't know how to use them.
Yeah, like if you're looking at the game, to me it felt like an old-timey cartoon. Yep. Set back in the World War era. When you think back to like the way Bugs Bunny looked, and not even just Bugs Bunny, but like them older style cartoons, Little Abner and all that stuff. Like you look at those style cartoons, and this is what this basically gives that feel and that vibe of that old school stuff. I was sitting there, I was looking at it, it was like I started looking at the detail in the backgrounds and the depth of what's going on. Like there's so much going on in this game that there's stuff like characters kind of talking to each other, and you notice because you'll see word bubbles or picture bubbles popping up over their head, and everywhere you go there's these little details and these little points of things happening deep in the background, because it feels like there's different layers of background going on, where like you have the foreground, then there's something on the back street, and then you see something on the rolling hills behind that, and it's like when it all comes together, it just feels really defined in my impression. Like I walked away from the early goings like, wow, this they put some time into this, and the way it looks and feels.
I was pretty impressed, like you were saying before, how the world felt like alive. I felt like the sound effects, I guess we'll get to the narrator in a little bit, but the sound effects for this game were spot on. Like normally you have an indie game and they normally focus on either the story or some of the visual elements, but I think the audio is key, and a lot of even little things like going up a ladder or moving a box, it felt like it was supposed to. It didn't feel like a generic just sound effect. So I thought that the audio was just really impressive for me. Actually, my favorite part of this game.
There's a moment that stands out to me is when the bombers are coming in and you're hearing the planes flying over top, and it's just like, oh my god, dude, this is like so impressive.
She brought me a book she'd found hidden away deep inside my shop, and I opened it to find drawings tucked inside, and they were familiar. I felt memories begin to stir inside me when an old photograph fell out from between the pages.
I feel like there is 2 guys, Morgan Freeman and Patrick Stewart, that are like the best narrators ever. And like you were saying before, I definitely think that the narration of this game, they could have gone with just pictures and text and even voiceovers, but the narration of this game really does make it feel like a child's story. That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's someone telling the story to someone else. And it's really strange too, because it's very childlike, but the tone and the setting of this game is really serious.
Ultimately, you're looking at this game, it's a 2D adventure game with puzzle aspects to it. There's also some stealth moments with it. So you're doing a lot of different things in this game, and it's basically, like you said, taking a bunch of different genres and putting it together, and I feel like they did it really well. Like you said, it does feel like by the end of the game, it's almost like you're wanting it to hurry up and get through. Like it feels like, okay, I kind of know what's going on at this point. You get that feel, which, not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's not the best of things either. I feel like it's just one of those things of like when you get into the moment, it's like, okay, they should have maybe worked a little bit to change it up a little bit to kind of keep you guessing. The next thing we want to talk about is the controls of the game. How did it feel to control these characters? Because that's ultimately what it is. You have two children in the game, and you're floating between the two, back and forth. You're taking control of each character, sometimes both at the same time, and both have different abilities.
I think the controls were pretty good. There's some points in the game that you have to like link up. So there's a mechanic where you have to hold hands in the game to do dual actions. Like, so for example, the girl can't sneak on her own, but if you link up with the boy, then you can both sneak. I found that in the faster segments, that input wouldn't always go in. Like if I wanted to hold the girl's hand, I would have to press it like 2 or 3 times for it to finally register.
If there's anything that I feel is a con in the game, it was the controls. It's the one thing that I felt like there was times I died just because the controls weren't as spot on. Didn't take away my fun in this game at all, but I did feel like there was a couple times I died where I was just like, oh man, if they would have just grabbed hands quicker, or if they would have just, this one would have moved faster, or oh man, I had to actually hold hands, or man, I was supposed to separate and I didn't separate quick enough, or you know, because there's a couple of spots where there's a spot in mines where the roof is kind of collapsing in on you, and you're trying to stealth at certain points, but you're also trying to speed up at certain points, and the boy does something and the girl does something. It was like so you're trying to flip flop between the two and who has controls, and there's times where it just got a little monotonous for me.
So I think that obviously the pro, like we were saying, is the presentation of this game. I feel like the audio was nailed completely. The setting, you feel like you are there. I mean, and it's crazy too, because we haven't even talked about this yet. The Nazi characters, I guess you would say, are robots.
Yes.
And it's like, that seems like a forced thing, but in this sense, like I took it as you kind of see through like a child's eyes, and you're kind of seeing like a more extreme version of what's happening. But I really liked the presentation, and I wanted to get through things faster to find out more of the story. And that seems like a bad thing, but that's a really great thing, because the story is told, and no spoilers, but the ending, there's a payoff. So it has a good ending.
For me, the game looks gorgeous. The music is fantastic. And Patrick Stewart is narrating this game. Like, seriously, like Pat said earlier, like, how could that ever be a bad thing? That to me was just like, holy crap. I forgot about this game. This game, the name of the game fell off my radar. But the only thing that kept it on my radar was the fact that I remembered there was an indie game being narrated by Patrick Stewart. Ultimately, it was a benefit for them to get him, because it kept it on a lot of people's radars of like, oh yeah, I want Captain Picard to be the narrator, or Professor Xavier, like whatever it might be, that you acknowledge who Patrick Stewart is. He's a phenomenal actor, and this definitely goes through and through. The story is a final thing. Like, it is so intriguing.
Going back to the controls, just the button inputs that didn't register the first or even the second time. But more so the cons, which is actually good for this game, is just a missed opportunity of making multiplayer. This game, I mean, you're controlling two people with two very different skill sets, and it would have been really nice to play this game, especially because it's only like a 3-hour game. So if you get someone else playing with you, I just think that it would be a lot more fun if like one person has to sneak while another person has to do things. So I think the opportunity there.
With me, like you talk about, one thing you talked about was the multiplayer aspect, and the idea of like, there are times where you're bouncing between the two characters. You're sending one character off in one direction to kind of handle some things, and the other character's going off in another direction to handle some things. It would have been kind of cool to like get a split screen moment or something where you're controlling one character, your friend's controlling the other character. So the scores we're scaling the game on is from a 1 to 10 scale. What we did was we took graphics, music, fun factor, controls, gave each element a score, then we took an average, and that will be the score for the overall of the game and be what it is. So Pat did this and I did this, so that's the way we're going.
So for graphics, I gave it a 7, and it seems a little high for a simplistic game like this, but I really did like how the world did feel alive. And I think the best part of this game, and especially a game in this genre, is the fact that certain items were colored red, and those were the points of emphasis. And it really kept you going, because a lot of these other, point and click adventure type games, which this is not, but adventure type game, you're always looking for the next item to get. And I think making these items red, definitely a smart decision.
You're pretty harsh. I gave it a 10. I thought that this game looked fantastic. I felt like this game, artistically wise, was everything that I could want from this game. I felt like the tone of the graphics drew me in and gave me more to want from this game. It just made me feel a lot from this game. So I gave it a 10.
Music, audio, narration, I have to give it a 10. That was the major part of this game that I think was definitely the strong point. And definitely, for Bobby was a selling point. So definitely, I think it was good.
Yeah.
10.
Myself, I gave it a 10 as well. I felt like the music, again, drew me into the game, made me feel like I was part of the game. It kept my emotions on high because of there was parts of the game that kind of felt sad, and the music hit those chords, and that's what you want from a game. You want a game that's telling a story, to be able to also tell the story via the music. You could take out the narration of Patrick Stewart, and I feel like just with animations, this game could have, with the music and the animations, told the same story. To me, that's a great soundtrack. That's a great thing that they're accomplishing. So you take that, you throw in Patrick Stewart on top of it, it's a 10 all the way for me. Next up is Fun Factor. Basically, for me, I gave this a 9, and I felt like this game overall for me was just a lot of fun, enjoyable. I felt like I found myself just never really being annoyed with the game, never really being upset with the game, just enjoying the game overall, and finding myself to just wanting to push forward, to hear more of the story, to just enjoy more of the story. So for me, it was a 9.
Yeah, for me, similar. It was an 8 though. I think it was really fun. Like I said before, if you add in multiplayer, I think this could even become a 10. I really liked finding, the next item and how to do it, because like we were saying before, you see the items, you'll see a bucket that's red and you're like, yeah, I need to use that somehow. And the way that you end up using items is very, very clever in this game. So
next up, we have controls, and it's the one thing that I said was an issue for me, was some of the time the input's not working properly. But again, like I said, it wasn't a major factor for me. It was just one of those things that I felt like I needed to point out with this. And my praise was so high for this game that I didn't want it to seem like it was just one-sided. Overall, I gave the controls an 8, though, for this. I didn't feel like it was that bad. I felt like the idea of having 2 sets of characters with different control schemes, different abilities for each, was pretty ingenious, pretty smart the way they handled that. So for me, it was an 8.
You're too nice, Bobby. You're so nice. I gave the controls a 6. Now, the only reason why I went that low is because there were points in the game where the controls cost me a life. Now, a life in this game really doesn't mean much because you start right again, which was another strength. But there were points where the controls, I couldn't link hands, or I couldn't, press A to interact with an object. So anytime controls get in the way of a game in some way, I'm going to be a little bit harsh on, but I said 6 for that.
Okay. Pat, we'll start with you. What was your average score, your overall score for this game?
So my overall score was a 7.75. I feel like it's a pretty fair score. And like I was saying before, you add in multiplayer, it goes up another point. I just think it's a missed opportunity. But overall, very impressive indie showing for this game.
For myself, I'm much higher than Patrick. I gave it a 9.25. I felt like this game was everything that I wanted. When I went in, when I got the review code, I knew that I wanted to play this game, and it didn't disappoint me at all. I went in blind to the story, to everything that was going on, just knew a little bit, just basically like I knew it was set World War II era type stuff. I knew that Patrick Stewart was the narrator of it. That's all I knew going in. And I felt like this game just drew me in big time, and I enjoyed it overall immensely. So I give it a 9.25. It's got a $14.99 price tag. And we both have varying scores on this. You gave it a 7.75. I gave it a 9.25. You would look at that and go like, well, they're kind of way off on the scale here. But would you recommend this game? What's your opinion? Is the value there for this game?
I definitely think it is. $14.99 is pretty much the price that you're going to pay for a premium indie title. And this is exactly that. If you like puzzle games, if you like story-driven games, this is right up your alley. And honestly, it's just a game that I don't think you can miss if that's your genre. And there were puzzle segments in this game that were really challenging. So definitely, if you guys check this out, at least put it on your wish list so you don't forget about it. But I would definitely recommend it.
For me, $14.99 is a no-brainer. It's worth its value. I feel like the storyline, everything, top to bottom, just pushes it to make it a more than playable game and a very fun game. I highly recommend everybody jump on this one and play it. So that is all. Thank you guys for tuning in to this Nintendo Guru game review. Be sure to check out everything that Patrick is doing on the interwebs. He's over on youtube.com/NintenTalk. He's also on Twitter @NintenTalk. You can find me here on this channel, Nintendo Guru, also on Twitter @Nintendo Gurus. That is all. Peace out, Preston.